And now we move on to Chapter 5, Worldly Holiness. The Holy in the Common. What is the place of worship and prayer in an entire absence of religion? Bernathar's question, which he never survived to answer, may sound too paradoxical to be intelligible. For worship and prayer would seem to be the expression of religion, the activities par excellence that distinguish a religious person from an irreligious. But we dare not simply dismiss the question. Rather, let it drive us to a more careful definition of terms. Perhaps the best way to define religious would be to ask, for instance, what is the difference between a religious film and a Christian film? Most people would, without thinking, tend to equate the two. But clearly, there is an important distinction to be made. A Christian film is one that embodies Christian judgments on situations, Christian valuations of personal relationships, Christian insights into the purpose and meaning of life. A religious film is one that is about a certain area of experience or activity. It could have a biblical or quasi-biblical subject. It could be about nuns or lords, or center around some religious movement or experience. It is possible for the former category to have nothing specifically to do with religion at all, while the latter, as we know, can be nauseatingly and profoundly unchristian. The religious, in the technical sense of the religious orders, is the antithesis of the secular. It relates to that department of life which is contrasted with the world, and, in its popular non-technical sense, it includes all those activities which go on within the circle of the sanctuary, whether literally or metaphorically. It is a particular area of experience or activity into which a man may turn aside or go apart, and which has its own psychology and sociology. A religious revival means the burgeoning of this area of experience and activity, and the process of secularization. I always have a hard time pronouncing this. Diminution or decline. You have a hard time pronouncing it, but you obviously didn't have a hard time spelling it. Hey, don't you judge me. Sorry, it's okay. Back to the book. And the churches are universally assumed to have a vested interest in the former and to deplore the latter. It is this assumption which Bonathar is putting this question mark. Does this mean he does not want anyone to go to church or say his prayers? Evidently not, for otherwise he would not ask what was the place of worship and prayer in the absence of religion. For they would obviously have no place. How then should we answer his question? Let us ask it in turn as he does, first of worship, public prayer, liturgy, the cultus, and then of private prayer, personal devotion, piety, and the spiritual life. Liturgy and worship, Lord on the face of it, seem to be concerned essentially with what takes place in a consecrated building, with the holy rather than the common, with religion rather than life. They belong to, and indeed virtually constitute, that area or department of experience which appeals to the religious type, to those who like that sort of thing, or get something out of it. Worship and church-going, except as an expression of an interest in religion, would not seem to most people to be meaningful. And yet the sacrament, which forms the heart of Christian worship, is the standing denial of all this. It is the assertion of the beyond in the midst of our life, the holy in the common. Holy Communion is the point at which the common, the communal, becomes the carrier of the uncommon, as the Christ makes himself known in the breaking and sharing of bread. Holy Communion is communion, community life, in sacris, in depth, at the level at which we are not merely in human fellowship, but in Christ, not merely in love, but in love, united with the ground and restorer of our whole being. At least that is what communion should be, but too often it is not the place at which the common and the communal point through to the beyond in their midst, to the transcendent in, with, and under them, but precisely the opposite. It ceases to be the holy meal and becomes a religious service in which we turn our backs on the common and the community, and in individualistic devotion go to make our communion with the God out there. This is the essence of the religious perversion, when worship becomes a realm into which to withdraw from the world to be with God, even if it is only in order to receive strength to go back into it. In this case, the entire realm of the non-religious, in other words, life, is relegated to the profane, in the strict sense of that which is outside the thanum or sanctuary. The holy place, where the Christ is met, lies not, as in the parable of the sheep and the goats, in the ordinary relationships of life. It lies within the circle of the religious, from which the worshipper will go out to carry Christ's love into the secular world. Worship, liturgy, on this understanding, is not meeting the holy in the common. The holy is that which is not common, and which has to be taken from the temple in order to sanctify the common. The sphere of the religious constitutes the Holy of Holies, and we are back at the Jewish priestly conception of the relation of the sacred to the secular, which was shattered by the incarnation when God declared all things holy, and the veil of the temple was rent from top to bottom. For Christianity, on the other hand, the holy is the depth of the common, just as the secular is not a godless section of life, but the world, God's world, for which Christ died, cut off and alienated from its true depth. The purpose of worship is not to retire from the secular into the department of the religious, let alone to escape from this world into the other world, but to open oneself to the meeting of the Christ in the common, to that which has the power to penetrate its superficiality and redeem it from its alienation. The function of worship is to make us more sensitive to these depths, to focus, sharpen, and deepen our response to the world and to other people beyond the point of proximate concern, of liking, self-interest, limited commitment, etc., to that of ultimate concern, to purify and correct our loves in the light of Christ's love, and in him to find the grace and power to be reconciled and reconciling community. Anything that achieves this or assists towards it is Christian worship. Anything that fails to do this is not Christian worship, be it ever so religious. All this finds its focus, as I have already indicated, in the liturgy that forms the heart of Christian worship. Liturgy, a word which comes in origin from the world not of the cultus but of public works, is not for the Christian a religious rite, but the proclamation, the acknowledgement, the reception, the adoration of the holy in, with, and under the common. The bread and the wine that stand at the heart of the action and form its basis are samples only of all other common things, and the focus of all other common relationships. The Holy Communion is the proclamation to the Church and to the world that the presence of Christ with his people is tied to a right receiving of the common, to a right relationship with one's neighbour. For it is given only in and through these things, both in church and out of it. What the action in church does is to set forth this truth in symbol and in power. And therefore, the pattern of this action is formative for the whole of Christian living. It must be made to represent the truth that the beyond is to be found at the centre of life, between man and man. That is why the prayer book indicates that the bread to be used for communion shall be such as is usual to be eaten. That is why the deepest insights into the meaning of God's thought hath come for many in our generation, not in the glass case of the sanctuary, but at their own hearth. That is why the liturgical revival has expressed itself in the recovery of the central altar with the celebration by the whole people gathered round the table.